just going to let people join the webinar today. Just give it a few minutes for people to come on in. I can just see lots of people joining now, so we'll get started in 2 or 3 minutes. But thank you to all of those that are here today. Sorry, I keep flicking that slide. Yeah, lots of people coming in. I'm coming to you from Squamish, BC, which is on the west coast of Canada. And it's a very beautiful day here today, about 28 degrees, super sunny day. So we're definitely in the heat of summer right now. Very nice to have. We have a pretty short summer season here, so we tend to get out of the office and get some bike riding done or something like that in the afternoons. Kim, what's it like in Queenstown today?
Well, Julie, thank you. I would say it's the opposite to you. We're in the midst of winter. School holidays still here for the Australian school holidays. New Zealand has school holidays just finished, but middle of winter, ski fields open. It's a winter wonderland for many today.
Oh, beautiful. Amazing. Yeah,
Mm.
it's so distinct. Hey, the opposite. And Nicole, why don't you tell us what it's like in Sydney today, since you're joining us from Sydney?
It was 6 degrees when we left the house, but it's getting warmer. Sunny, no clouds here in Sydney, but so it's beautiful. Can't complain. School holidays for us as well, Kim. So it's bit
Oh, yeah.
yeah, quiet, which
You're
means it's
coming.
quiet on the roads, but it's chaos in the
Yeah.
households.
Yes. Yes. We're on school holidays as well, but in Canada, we have a
Nice.
long summer holidays, like 9 weeks of school holidays, and they just got
Wow,
started. We're pretty ready to send them back when the time comes. But for now, it's still early days, so we're still enjoying the kids at home for now. So awesome. Well,
wonderful.
Love it.
have a good number. Oh, it's just 4:01. Maybe I'll give it one more minute because we still see lots of people joining. We've got a really strong number of participants today. We're really excited to chat about culture. We found that this topic has drawn lots of interest, and I know it's near and dear to all three of our hearts.
Mm.
I know all three of us have worked in HR for a long time and are really passionate about workplaces with amazing cultures, and we're really excited to share with you our thoughts today on some of the pieces that come together to create an amazing culture. So thank you all for joining us. I will flick to the next slide and we can do some introductions. So, my name is Julie Morris. I'm the country manager of MyHR Canada. We are fairly new in Canada, just 18 months into rolling out MyHR in Canada. People are really loving the platform, working with lots of small businesses and really enjoying getting to know a client base. I've worked in HR for over 20 years now, mostly inside organizations with some consulting work. So my original my original degree was in education, so that learning and development side is a passion for mine, and that feeling of culture and working for places that really have that strong culture has always been something I've been striving for. So, and then I'll hand it over to Kim to introduce herself.
Thanks, Julie. Good morning to everyone who's dialing in from Australia or New Zealand, and good afternoon to all those dialing in from Canada. My name's Kim, and I'm the People and Capability Lead for Brannigans. We're an all-purpose people solutions consultancy, and I have the privilege of working with a diverse number of industries to help them build tailor-made, bespoke HR solutions to their unique and always unique people challenges. Thank you.
Awesome. And then we have Nicole Cariatis joining us. So Nicole is the new country manager for Australia, MyHR Australia. So Nicole and I share a similar job, and she's brand new to the role, which is super exciting. So Nicole, do you want to say hi and say a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Excited to be here. Hi, everyone. Hello from Sydney. This is week 2 for me now, so I'm super fresh. But I do come with 20 years of experience in the HR world. Similar to you both, I have a passion for culture and for all things leadership. I have a master's degree in coaching and leadership and a bachelor's degree in HR and business management. And I've worked in different sectors. So great to be here, and I'm really looking forward for this webinar.
Awesome. So Nicole is going to be watching now, and Kim and I are going to be walking you through the slides that we have. Kim and I will be sort of trading off, sharing stories, and giving some information throughout. And we'll start off, Kim, with you taking us through the agenda. We will have an opportunity for question and answer at the end, and we will do a small demo of the MyHR platform at the end, in case anyone would like to stick around and have a look at how we can weave culture into the MyHR platform, or how we do that. So Kim, here's your agenda.
Thanks, Julie. So thank you again for joining us. Workplace culture is very important, and it dictates the company's success. Engaged team members are part of a successful workforce if there's a strong workplace culture. So what we're going to cover today is, what is workplace culture? How do we create it? How do we continue to grow and develop it? How do we define the organization's core values and embed them into all that we do? What is the manager's role in this, and how do regular check-ins also continue to develop a good workplace culture? How to handle cultural drift, and as Julie just alluded to earlier, and we'll do a short demo on the MyHR platform as well.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks, Kim. The question and answer button is available throughout, so you're welcome to post your questions, and if it makes sense, we'll answer them as we go, and if not, we will leave them to the end and go through them at the end there. So I know sometimes when you're listening, you get a great question and then you forget it, so feel free to pop it in the Q&A at any point in time. And Kim, I'm going to put you on the spot right off the bat, and ask you to lead off with your thoughts on what culture is in an organization, and then I'll give you a few more of my thoughts. So go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie. So workplace culture refers to the personality of the organisation. It's a shared values, beliefs, behaviours and practices that show how people should interact together, work together, and that approach and how they approach tasks within their organisations. A strong workplace culture is really crucial, as it directly affects employee engagement. If you feel part of something, you feel a sense of belonging, you feel a sense of shared purpose, you're likely to be an engaged employee. And engaged employees are more productive. Companies are more successful if they've got an engaged workforce. Thanks, Julie.
Amazing. I have this story that when I was quite young, I got off a bus, like a long kind of bus, and I overheard the bus driver say, only like 96 more months until I retire. And I remember being really taken aback by that idea that someone would stay in a job for sort of a really long length of time, thinking about, their retirement. And I was probably a little bit naive back then in my 20s, but it's funny that really stuck with me, because I think it's shaped my career a little bit, in that, I really value people working for organizations where they do feel aligned with that culture, and they do feel a sense of sort of shared purpose and shared commitment to the organization. And it is a little bit nebulous at times, like what creates that? What makes people want to be part of it? And there's a couple of things here that are specific and actually actionable in an organization that do help with that culture piece. So one of them is having shared values, and we sometimes call those core values. They can be implicit or explicit. We recommend having values that are really well defined, that you can speak to and that you encourage connection to throughout different parts of the organization. And we'll talk a bit more specifically about that. And essentially, what makes up a culture is, what are the accepted, as Kim said, what are the behaviors that we see in the organization? What behaviors are accepted and encouraged? And how do those behaviors, shape the regular feeling of the organization? And then the expectations that are widely adopted as well. So we don't think about like culture as conformity necessarily. We think of it more as sort of a general way of being. And you would see this in your family as well. Not everyone in the family is the same, but there's a certain way of being that the family has. And businesses and organizations are that way as well. And you have the option to make it intentionally a way of being, or just let it evolve and become. I think it's more important than ever. I think our younger generation is looking for organizations that are values led and that are connected to their own values and are clear on what the values are. And it can be harder to build with remote teams. So I know, as organizations go remote, it can take some more effort and some more work to really describe what the values and the culture are of the organization so that people get that feeling and can connect with those values. And I've got that little picture of an iceberg there because I really think that it sort of paints a picture for me of that a little bit, that there's things you see on the top, right, that are, what you see in an organization, and those are led by the values underneath the organization. And it can be something as simple as, some organizations have a culture where, showing up for a meeting on time or even at all is not really that important. And other organizations have a culture where, being punctual and being in the meeting and being engaged is a really important part of the culture. So that's that idea of like what shows up day to day, but what's it fed by? What values exist underneath there? I've got a few, sort of examples of. Was there anything I missed there, Kim, that you wanted to add?
I guess what I would say, over my 2+ decades of working in HR, I've worked for a number of organisations with really strong workplace culture, and I can't undervalue how engaged it makes you feel. If I could, Julie, just take a moment to say, I work for Brannigans and I work with a fab group of people, and that certainly builds the culture. But it's more than that. It's that shared purpose. And if I could share our purpose statement, as a better people, make a better world. And so I work with a team that's bigger than me. It's part of a bigger process, and I feel a part of that purpose. And I think the values that we'll talk about shortly underpin and make that purpose come to life. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's amazing. I love that statement, Kim, right? Better people make better lives. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that statement. And it's funny how long of an impact something like that can have. So, in my early part of my career, I worked for Whistler Blackcomb, and I still remember their mission statement, right? I still remember what they were about and a lot of the core values that existed there, which is really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of things I've forgotten in my time, but kind of hearkening back to that. So we wanted to give you, some examples. I think you're really, if you're lucky enough to work for an organization that has strong values and has a really great culture, then that's amazing. And if you think your organization still has work to do in this area, it's work that can be done and is easy to do, right? You just have to think about it a little bit. So what I put here was MyHR's core values. So when I first started with MyHR, they shared with me right off the bat, here are our core values: own it, make it easy, work together, and don't be a dick, which is kind of hilarious because don't be a dick doesn't translate quite right in Canada. We wouldn't really say that saying as much. So, we've chatted a little bit about that. Like, no, it just works. I'm like, okay, we can have it. But this little slideshow, this little shot here is taken exactly from our Slack channel. So we have a channel in our Slack that's called MyHR Values, and people get called out on that channel when they're demonstrating things that align with their values there. And there you can see, what the values actually mean. And that picture in there is actually a mural that's on the wall in the MyHR office in Auckland. So, really good example, keeping it simple, 4 core values, nice and succinct there. Some easy pieces there. So if you don't have any core values, right? So it can be as simple as asking your employees, what do you think we value around here? And I know when they did the values work at MyHR, they did engage a consultant at first, and then they didn't actually like what the consultant came up with, and they actually just went to the employees and discussed it with the employees about what do we want to see, what do we believe in here, and the group came up with it. Doesn't have to be fancy language. It can just be a conversation that's had a couple of times, and then you can start working with those core values. Kim, have you seen organizations that don't have values develop them?
Definitely from a workshop point of view. So the companies we consult with, we can work with them to see what their mission is, where their vision is, and how the values and the purpose will align, support, and help achieve those organizational values. So it is very much employee-led. because you need to feel engagement and a sense of belonging to those values.
Yeah, I really value that idea of engaging your employees in it. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So once you have those values, or you have a sense of like what it's all about, like what is driving your culture, we want to actually, embed those values in an organization. So have them come up regularly and speak to them regularly. That's how we're actually going to bring them to life and have them not be just words that are on the wall. So Kim, do you want to walk us through some of the ideas you and I had here about how you do embed core values in an organization?
Absolutely. And thanks, Julie. It has to be part of the everyday business. It has to be embedded in everything you do, the behaviours, the decisions, the way you communicate with each other. And I just want to give you an example of what we do here at Brannigans. One of our values is be connected. So one of our values of being connected is being connected with the team, our clients, our candidates, and our community. So that's embedded in all that we do. So in terms of onboarding people into our organisation, it's part of the interview questions is what are your values, how do you fit? But also for a client, when we're working with a client, we're really clear that we understand what their values are, or what their workplace culture is, so we can embed it in the interview. For example, it's no point a vegetarian being into, well, I shouldn't say no point because that could be an exaggeration, but a vegetarian going to work for an abattoir. The values potentially don't fit. So it's really important that we understand the values, because we can teach skills and companies can teach skills. Values are really hard to teach because they're a sense of belonging. In terms of the onboarding process, be connected with your team, introduce them to the team if that's your value, and that's one of our values, be connected. How do you embed those values in your onboarding process, and use examples of how they work, the communication channels, the celebrations, the performance reviews, the check-ins, use that feedback in the conversation. So in your check-ins, you could use your values to frame your conversation, and talk to those values as to whether we're achieving them, we need to redirect back towards them. And in terms of recognising employees for demonstrating the core values, we as an organisation have monthly shout outs, and all team members are involved in this, and we can shout out to our colleagues who have demonstrated living the values. And I think that's really important that you celebrate it as well as redirect people back to them when those behaviours aren't quite in line with your values.
Amazing. Yeah, that always makes me think about, what gets recognized gets repeated, right? So
Absolutely.
whatever we give people kudos for, and it doesn't matter how long you've been in your career, it always feels good to hear that you've done something well. And when we're recognizing things or asking for more of the same or shouting people out, that's how you really build those values, those values in. And one thing I find is that having a way to connect, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute when we talk about the manager's role in this, having a way to actually describe the behavior you're looking for with some core values language can be really helpful, right? So if you've defined what own it looks like, so if one of our core values, if you've defined what own it looks like, and then you see someone that's maybe not delivering on that, you have some better language to have a conversation on it, right? Like, one of our values is this, what we're looking for, this is why this is important to our organization, and these are the changes or adjustments we need you to make. So, yeah.
And that's not a negative conversation. I think it's a really positive conversation if you can frame it in that way. It's about realigning people back to the value. It's not a personal opinion. It's a value that we've all agreed to. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So much easier. Awesome. And so thinking about what role owners, leaders, and managers play in supporting a positive culture. So I think this was my question to answer, Kim. So I'll just go ahead.
Yes.
How does that sound? And I have owners, leaders, and managers in there, right? Because depending on the size of your organization, you may be a sole owner and sort of pushing through that yourself, right? Trying to push through that, getting everyone on the same page, and feeling the weight of that there. You also might have leaders or managers working with you on that. So regardless of the size of your organization, I think having those values and being able to promote those values is really important. And I think we sometimes underestimate how much power a manager, a leader, or an owner has on the organization. So generally, people look to the leader or the owner of the organization for the behaviors that are acceptable, for the pieces that are recognizable. They're really looking for that sense of what is this organization all about, and how do I fit in here? How do I belong here? And looking to the leader for that piece there. We have a few sort of specific, right, pieces there. The details is this me or you, Kim? Sorry.
That's you, but I'm happy to help.
It's all good. I'll keep going. I just didn't want to talk too much.
That's right.
We really think about managers being the culture keepers, right? So their everyday behavior sets the tone for the organization. And that's why it's really important that when you are promoting someone into a leadership position, that they have alignment of your values, right? So if you have a manager that tends to be prone to being negative and a little bit challenging, that is going to set the tone for the rest of the organization, and it can have a real impact on your culture, right? As we talked about, right, how your managers give feedback and recognize around the core values is really important, or around the values of the organization is really important. It's also really important that we're training managers to handle conflict and give feedback in alignment with the core values, right? Or with the values of the organization. So we're trying to build that alignment with all managers and leaders sort of walking the talk and talking the talk, even if it might be challenging at times. So those are kind of some pieces there. And anything to add there?
Julie, I was just going to also say, if we walk past poor behaviour, if a manager walks past poor behaviour and doesn't call it out, and we'll talk about this in a bit more detail shortly, but it really sets the standard and that culture can really drift. So it's really important that everyone is aligned with the values once they are agreed upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I had an example here, that idea of like, when you're having that a values aligned conversation, it can be as simple as saying something like, hey, Kim, I noticed that we're not meeting our service. I heard back from a client that they'd had trouble getting in touch with you and being connected with you. Can you describe what was happening in that situation? And, I just want to connect with you on that, because one of our values is own it and connectedness. And we want to make sure that we're really staying in touch with our clients. Can you tell me what was going on there? Right? Kim might give me the feedback that, oh, she got really overwhelmed and swamped. And just reiterating the idea that totally understand that. Let's work out a way to kind of figure out your volume and really making sure we're getting back to people. So you can see how that conversation can be quite an easy coaching conversation, because we've got the value of the organization at the center of it. It's not me against you about what we're expecting. It's us both working together to get the employee focused on delivering at the level of the value that we're looking for. Awesome. Kim, you're going to talk a little bit about psychological safety for us and culture. So yeah, I'm going to leave this to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. What I'd like to say here is culture thrives when people feel safe and secure within the workplace. And what I mean by that, if one of your values is to own it and achieve it, it's about, if you make a mistake, that you feel safe in saying you've made a mistake. You feel safe in saying that someone else in my team's got my back, and we will learn from this mistake, as opposed to a culture that says, be innovative, take on new challenges, but don't make a mistake, because everyone's going to be afraid to make the mistakes. And I think it's really important that people feel safe in bringing their whole selves to work. So we want culturally diverse and inclusive workplaces. And a lot of companies speak to that, but their values recognise that. So inclusion is being able to speak your mind, be able to offer your unique view on things, your opinions on things, you'll share your skills and experience without being shut down. So psychologically, being safe in the workplace is about being comfortable and being who you are, providing the feedback, the skills, the experience that you were recruited for in that company, and really feel like you can contribute to that overall purpose. So I guess, a good way of looking at it is to encourage curiosity, which we've got in the slide there. So mistakes happen, we're all human, but why did they happen and what can we learn from it? It's not about blame. We're all part of one team, one shared purpose and shared values. So I think it's really important to understand that and to work in that manner within the workplace. The other point we've got there on the slide, which I think is really super important, is also listen to the quiet ones. Often the quiet ones in the team are the ones that are being reflective, they're thinking, they're digesting, and they're going to come up with their ideas. It's not necessarily the most outspoken or the loudest. And so create that opportunity for the quiet ones to speak as well, because they don't feel so safe maybe, and they need encouraging to do that. So that safety creates a sense of belonging, a sense of being able to be who you are, which creates that employee engagement. And as I said at the start, engaged employees are more committed to the cause. So by default, they're more productive and then the company is more successful. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Julie.
Yeah, I think you're right on there, Kim. And you know, it's psychological safety is another thing that's a little bit hard to know whether you've got it or not. And one thing I really find is that if I start seeing turnover, like quite a bit of turnover or quick turnover, so you hire someone, they get started in the organization, and then within 6 or 8 weeks, they're sort of giving notice, especially if you're hiring sort of frontline employees. A lot of people often kind of go, oh, well, there is just turnover in the business. And what you really want to do is you want to tune in on that a little bit and go, you know, did I share what this organization is about? Did I share what matters here? And have I had people, you know, have I made a space where people feel successful? I was working with an organization where they hired a young person, and I happened to know that young person, and that young person shared with me a situation that had happened at work for them. And it really, like, it was an interaction with a customer, and someone had stepped in and it hadn't aligned with this girl's values on how the organization dealt with it. And rather than speak to someone about it, she just slowly started to disengage and looked for a new position. So, and I see that happen really regularly, right? When young people, more young, I mean, everyone wants their values to be aligned, but I'm seeing it really regularly when those values aren't aligned, people will just go and find something else, right? So really important that there's a sense of psychological safety and that we're having those conversations and checking in, which is going to lead us into our sort of next slide here, right? Which is around the check-in conversation. And Kim, it speaks to your point as well that, you know, tune into the quiet people, right? So often when things are happening in an organization, we won't hear from the quiet people in the organization. So we'll hear from the loud people, we'll hear from the outgoing people, but we're not hearing. And one thing that you know, Kim and I, and I'm sure Nicole, all promote is the regular check-in conversations. I think that there's just so much research out there that the number one thing you can do to create psychological safety and build culture and have a great workplace and engage team members is having regular check-in conversations. And this is really as simple as you know, as simple as connecting with someone and asking them how they're doing. So, and in that situation I gave you, I think if the manager or owner had sort of noticed or noticed that something was off with this team member, they could have simply said, hey, is everything okay? Like, what's going on for you? And if that employee had shared what had happened and where that values misalignment was, it could have saved the situation from turnover, right? So kind of an interesting piece there. And can we have a few details here on check-in conversations? Do you want to just elaborate on, you know, what we consider a check-in conversation?
Sure. Thanks, Julie. I think for me, often check-ins are performance reviews, and they could be just, you know, quarterly or every 6 months or annually. That's not enough for a check-in for team members. They need to have regular check-ins that are not about necessarily tracking performance, but about talking about your values. What are they doing well in terms of praising the alignment with the values, but also redirecting people back to the values when their behaviours may have demonstrated that they weren't quite aligned. I think it gives a really open opportunity to have open and transparent conversations, and that's where you can also talk to your team about what is niggling them, what isn't working, how do you support better collaboration amongst the team, and just to get a real understanding of how the team members are succeeding or working towards their goals or the challenges they're facing. And I think that's a real opportunity to talk to the quieter people as well, to get their input, to get their feedback, and to reinforce that psychological safety and well-being in the workplace, that they are being heard and that they are feeling they are valued in what they bring to the company. So if you have those regular check-ins, they don't need to be massive. They can be a coffee, they can be a catch-up, they can be a Teams call for remote team members. But those regular check-ins are really important, particularly for remote people, because that sense of connection and that sense of belonging and being able to add value is hugely important to employee engagement. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Julie.
And it can be when you're driving to a meeting, right? You're just in the car with somebody,
Absolutely.
right? It can be, on a job site when you're just taking a little break. All of those options exist. And, there's three like core questions that I like, which is, how are things going for you and what are you enjoying about your job? Like, what do you like about what you're doing? What are you struggling with? Is there anything, and is there any help I can
How
provide?
can I
Right?
help?
Those
Absolutely.
how can I help? Very simple check-in questions. And, and it makes a world of difference. And you'd be surprised how many employees will say, my manager hasn't checked in with me in the last 6 months, right? So you can work right alongside someone and they still feel like they haven't had a check-in, and that's just making that a little bit more intentional. And I think that those conversations go a long way to building culture and creating alignment around the values that are present in the organization. Thanks, Kim.
Absolutely. And the other thing, Julie, I was just going to add there, sorry,
Yeah,
is, you said earlier, what gets measured gets done. And so
yeah.
that praise that you can give your team members for aligning with the values reinforces that they are being recognized for doing that. You are seeing that in the workplace, and it's the way to move forward for everybody. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Awesome. I see some great questions coming in, which is awesome. So keep those questions coming. We're just going to talk for about five more minutes, and then we're going to start answering those questions. So thank you to those of us that have submitted them, and just keep those coming. Awesome. So we're going to talk briefly about addressing culture drift. So, like anything else, if you set it and then forget it, things tend to sort of drift or change or move. So, keeping culture present and creating a really positive, engaged workforce does take effort, and it does take continuing to work on things and tweak things, and I know that. What you can see is that you have some really strong culture keepers. And should one of them leave the organization, you might feel that things are drifting a little bit. You might put a new manager into a role and they weren't quite as strong about keeping the culture. You might have an office manager that leaves and they were the person that really created the energy and whatnot. So all of those things can happen. Similarly, you can come across a period of really high work volume and everyone's getting stressed and things are really tense, and you start to see some of those core values drift or the culture sort of drift a little bit. So, recognizing some early signs, like I said, turnover is really an important piece of it. Silence, people not saying anything, people sort of confused about where the organization is going, cliques or silos forming in the organization. Those are signs of potentially a drift from the culture of what you're up to. Um, and and toxic behaviors that we've talked about a little bit, right? So toxic is quite a strong word, but it can be something as simple as, like I say, people gossiping or starting to talk behind each other's backs, or hoarding information, or not sharing information. So I think it's really important to sort of notice that it's happening and then re-dig in with some of those culture pieces there. And it might be some really direct conversations about with one-on-one. So often I see people try and go, well, tell everybody about it. I think telling everybody is important, but also addressing where the issues are is really important as well. So if you have one or two team members that you're seeing behavior that just really isn't in alignment with the values, that's when you're having those, direct conversations about what the values are and the behaviors you're seeing that are not in alignment with those values, right? So having those direct corrective conversations are really important. And then just reinvigorating it. It might be doing a planning session, right? So putting the core values back up on the wall and saying like, hey, team, remember we did these a couple of years ago. I really feel we need to put some new energy around them. Let's talk about what they mean. Let's just have a morning tea and talk about what do these mean and how do we bring them back. So same as creating the core values with your team, you can always bring them back again and be like, hey, let's reconnect around these core values. It could be starting up a Slack channel for recognition or some kind of recognition program. There's always an opportunity to bring about sort of a new way to do it. And it's not really a one approach. You really want to kind of have a wide approach there, and think about, where are we going off track and how do we get back on track there?
One other
Great.
thing I've seen there,
Yeah,
Julie, sorry to interrupt you, is some
not at all.
companies using their values as a group charter. So to reinvigorate them, they pull their values out, they all talk about them, they might tweak them, but they all sign acceptance or agreeance
Mhm.
or to
Yeah.
belong to that value, and that value becomes their group charter. So it's actually, having addressing culture drift is a challenging conversation sometimes, but it's
Yeah.
easier to have that challenging conversation than deal with team members that are leaving because they don't feel part of that culture, or the culture's not standing up to what it used to be. So having your culture, your values, on a group charter, everyone signing it is a great way of revigorating it and putting it on the wall, holding people to account for those values.
Amazing. Yeah, 100%. I've seen people
Mm.
even decide to create a bit of a vision for the next 4 or 5 years, right? So like, where do we want to be in 5 years? Engaging their team around that, and then reflecting, building the core values into that vision, right? And then posting that up on the wall. So yeah,
Yeah,
anything that
great.
keeps it present. And we've got about a couple more minutes here, Kim and I, we're thinking we would just give a few more ideas about, how do you, what are some initiatives? And one that I've done that I like to see, that I often get requests for in like a professional services sort of industry is, having performance reviews that have a career framework in them. So an idea of like, what do the values look like at all different levels, right? So if we take the MyHR values and we go, at an own it at a country manager level, like my role, is probably going to look a little bit different than, someone that's fresh out of school and learning HR at the front line of my HR. So, but being clear on what are we expecting people to do when we say own it at a front line sort of level and at a country manager level and everything in between. So, a career framework I've seen have worked really well, and just giving that language around what do the values look like at different levels, and what are we looking for there. And in terms of competencies and frameworks, there's a lot with AI. There's a lot you can develop with the use of an AI tool. So don't be afraid to plug that in and say, hey, one of our core values is innovation. Tell me what that looks like at 3 different levels in the organization, and I promise you'll get some great information out. Um, what do you think, Kim? Some ideas on, I know we've talked it through a few throughout. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you think works really well to drive culture in an organization?
I think it's just got to be usable. It's got to relate to the team members. It's got to relate to the organisation, and it's got to be common language speak so we can use it every day. There's no point putting something on the wall that people can't integrate into their workplace. And if I could just give you an example. So one of our values is forge the unbreakable, but we've got behaviours that we want to display, and they're as simple as we treat others like we want to be treated. We have each other's back. We're honest and transparent. We look out for each other. So some really key behaviours that we can hold ourselves accountable for, and hold our team members accountable for. And I think that's the really key part, is to have the behaviours that display your values or support your values.
Absolutely. And it can look really different. I worked for
Absolutely.
I work for the Sea to Sky Gondola here, and one of their values is around fun and engagement at work. And for a while, they were doing like this weekly challenge where employees had to post a picture doing a weekly challenge,
Yeah.
right? And it was really fun and engaging, right? It was sometimes, like could be something like jokes, telling jokes, or I think it was a human pyramid one week, and like, I mean, they're young, engaged, right? And so it can be really different, right? And what you're going to have at a digital marketing agency is probably going to be quite different than what you have in a tourism-based organization. But I guess my advice is don't be afraid to try something a little bit different and really make sure it aligns with your organization. That's what makes organizations unique, and that's what builds really strong culture, right? So, some of those key pieces there are really important.
Absolutely. Embrace the joy and celebrate the success.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're kind of right on time when we plan to go to our, let's do that. I'm going to do that with the
Mm.
talking about the platform a little bit. So I'll come back to that slide, and let's go to questions and answers, because we've got quite a few really great questions here. So I've just opened these up, Kim, and I'll kind of have a read, and I'll throw one to you and then answer a few myself. So how do you deal with a staff that refuses to change and follow in the company values, really stuck in an old-fashioned way of working and communicating? Um, what do you want to take a stab at that one, Kim?
Sure. So just reword that to me. Team members that don't align with the values, and it's really challenging.
Yeah, or sort of stuck in
Yeah,
their old ways, and they're like, what are these
yeah.
about anyways, right?
Okay. So I think it's about, again, a shared purpose. Like, do they believe in where the company's heading? Do they believe in the roles that they do? And let's have that conversation, because if they're not aligned with the values or the purpose for the organization, you have to have some really tough conversations, because those people will take you away from achieving your true north. So my take on that is all team members will have their own personalities, their own behaviours outside the workplace. But in the workplace, we all agree to a way forward, or a true north is what I say, and we're all heading in the same direction. We all have to be aligned to those. And in a very hard manner, you're on the bus or off the bus. You know, it's your organisation. You need to be successful in the organisation. So I think you really have to have those difficult conversations, but also understand why they're not aligned with those values and what we can do to help them achieve those or work alongside those values, or understand what their challenges are. I think the conversation has to be had, and it sometimes can be a challenging conversation, but it's more challenging if you lose that workplace culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's I think that's 100% true, Kim. And it can just be really pointing out that, that their behaviors and actions don't appear to be aligned with the values of the organization. And, what are their thoughts, right? What's going on for them? And sometimes you can learn in that something has disengaged them, right? Like there's been a trigger activity that has disengaged them. And sometimes you can work through that, right? With that difficult conversation. I see that happen too. And someone's asked a similar question. They're saying, should you just move people along if it's really clear, or should you try and save them? And I think, my answer to that would be, you always want to have that conversation and see where that employee is at and give that feedback, right? And see what's going on for that employee. I mean, if it's, you've had a number of conversations, and you just don't feel like you're going to get there, that would be when you'd have a conversation about, what does it look like to move this person on, and make sure you're getting some good advice on that, on how to do that legally, and how to manage the fallout, with your team when you do move somebody on. But yes, in some situations, you actually, if you do have someone that's massively disrupting your culture, and you've done all the coaching you can and requested change, and tried to make things different, then you may have to actually, move someone on for sure. How do you encourage change in an organization that has lots of silos? So, Kim, do you want to start that one off?
Well, one of your values were, if we talked about both MyHR and Brannigans, one of our values is similar in terms of own it. So collaboration is part of that. You own the task that you want to do. You own the ability to have success in your team, to collaborate with team members to be able to achieve it. So own it, achieve it. You can't do it on your own. It's about collaboration. So I would, again, be workshopping with those particular silos to understand where their challenges are, what they can do, because there is crossover, and let's try and work to find what those transferable duties are, or those tasks are, because we are all in the same team, and it's about that collaboration that's going to make it work. But I think the first point is trying to find out why the teams aren't working together, and find some common ground at the very start to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and is there a way to actually create a way for the connection to occur, right? To build those connections between the teams, and to start getting people, to work together. Absolutely. Great.
And if those
We got
shared
a few-
values are there, they should
yeah.
be able to work towards that, which would be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even just calling sometimes that you feel like there's some silos happening, even just taking that elephant out from the under the table and being like, hey, it really feels like there's some silos here and that we're not working well together. And I'd love all of your opinion on that. And like, how can we work better together? Right. And what are the areas that we're just really in our own zone, and where else, could those connections exist? Right. I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes, like, my advice is always have a good conversation. And it often comes down to that for sure.
Absolutely. And I think if you start those conversations with a restorative approach, you want to fix it, or a curious approach, you want to understand
Yeah.
what's wrong. So there's no blame. It's not
Yeah.
about that. It's about moving forward. And I think if you have a forward focus, those conversations can be really constructive.
Awesome. Absolutely. Another couple of questions that are kind of coming to a couple of questions that are the same, which is how often do you have a check-in conversation? And I think it really depends, right? So lots of research says that, you should be checking in with everybody for 5 or 10 minutes every couple of weeks, right? Just checking in. Some people that are doing repetitive, sort of regular work, you could say once a month. Someone said, is 3 months okay? If you're going to make it a bit more of a robust check-in, I would say 3 months is okay. If you do more frequent check-ins, they will be quicker, and they will be, more of a regular routine. So I would say more frequently is helpful. It makes it more of a regular thing. When things come up, people don't stew on them. So it can be, if you can do it regularly and can keep notes somewhere, and actually know who you're checking with when, and being a little bit organized about that, you'll see big results on that employee engagement. What would you say on terms of timing, Kim?
Absolutely agree. I think the other consideration to take is whether that team member is remote or within the office. Because when the team member is remote, you have to make a more intentional effort to have those regular connections. You might have fortnightly connections in the diary, but you're obviously, at times you'll talk more often and you'll postpone those regular catch-ups. But if you've got something locked in the diary, you're not going to let it slip for a long time. And I think fortnightly for remote is really important. And within the office, because it does keep it a little bit more informal. And as Julie said, things don't build up or fester away.
Amazing. A good question here on what's your advice on how you measure unmeasurable when it comes to aspects of culture? And I think one of the great pieces about that is to try and start to make the unmeasurable measurable. And how I find, ways to do that is to start to add language around it, right? So, if we're talking about the value of own it, right? Or we work together, what does that actually mean, right? So flushing that out and trying to describe the actual behaviors that exist under that value can be really helpful to start to make that more measurable, and to start to give that language to that. When you pick a word like innovation, or striving to be the best, or excellence, or always learning, when you pick any of those things, if you can define what it looks like more, that can definitely be a way to make it more measurable. And then the other side of that is, asking the employee to self-reflect on how they're doing with those values. So, right, we always have a bit of a bias when we're looking at someone else, and we don't always remember, or we are not always completely tuned into what the employee is doing and remembering. So, starting with an evaluation where the employee is reflecting on their own demonstration of the values first, I think is really a really promising sort of way to move forward. Anything to add there?
No, I think you've nailed it, Julie.
Awesome. Perfect. So we've got time for about one or two more questions. Oh, it's been a while since we've reviewed our core values. How often should you review them together as staff changes, and as staff changes, do the values change? So, Kim, I'll give that one to you.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I think, as markets change, workplaces change, sometimes the vision or the mission might change, but the core values predominantly stay the same with an organization. They could be tweaked or added to, but they can predominantly stay the same. So I think it's really important that you regularly refresh them with your team members. And when I say refresh, I remind your team members of them. And as I said earlier about the charter, the group charter, people aligning with them, signing them, or agreeing to them. So I don't necessarily think values will change. They might be realigned or added to, as I said, but they don't change. So I think it's really important that you regularly refresh them with your team members, and that could be every quarter at a team meeting, or you shout out the team values at your meetings to celebrate the success of them, or just keep them going in your everyday language would be my answer to that.
Yeah, amazing. I would agree with everything you said there, Kim. One of the questions that came up is, how do you address cliques in the business? It's important to have friendships. However, when there are strong characters and the clique is, can become intimidating to new members. So again, I think that, I would talk about, what are the behaviors that are acceptable in terms of friendships in the office, and what are the behaviors that are not acceptable or that don't align align with your values. So, you know, if you were to look at that clique and go, what is actually happening that might be behavior that's not acceptable? So again, sort of defining what you're seeing, and then going, this is okay, and I want to see less of this, right? So, and then that would be having a conversation, right? This is how we welcome new people into the organization. This is where friendships are, you know, where we kind of have to draw the line on friendships. This is stuff that can happen in the office, but this is stuff that's best left for outside of the office. So really, you know, taking a moment to reflect on what you're seeing in the organization, and then, you know, looking at what aligns with your values, what doesn't align with your values, and then not being afraid to have those conversations and to be really clear, like, hey, I know you're really good friends with this person. I respect that. I know it brings a lot of joy into you at work. And sometimes when new people join the organization, it's really hard for them to break in or to feel part of the team. What I would love to see is this, right? Is a little bit less, you know, talking internally between the two of you in the office, more inclusion, letting other people in on the conversation. And by all means, when you're on your own time, like go for it and you know, enjoy that friendship. So just really defining what are those behaviors that you're looking for and what are you not. Oh, good question here. Do you think it's necessary for a company to have external values, which you outwardly share with your clients or customers, as well as internal values, or would you show your internal ones to the external world? What are your thoughts on that, Kim?
I guess I can speak from a Brannigans point of view. They are the same values. So if we say be connected, let's be connected with all stakeholders, whether it's the community we work within, whether it's team members that we work with, the clients, the candidates, the companies. Our values are our values, and they are internal and external. The behaviours that we display are external and internal as well. So for us, for the example that I used just now with Brannigans, ours are both inward and outward facing.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. And we have, you know, so I've seen a little bit of both. Sometimes we tweak the language slightly for external, like with ours, don't be a dick. We may not put that out there as an external value, but we have, you know, own it, make it easy, right? Make it easy is definitely one of our external values. So you can have a little bit of both there, right? A question here that sort of relates was, do you have values created by a global team? Do you think it's wise to have additional local values? I like to think about the core values as the core values of the organization. So when you do bring on global entities, like checking those core values against that. So, you know, we may shift the language of, if we had a big team in Canada, we may shift the language of don't be a dick slightly for Canada, but it would still have the same messaging, right? That we're really about working well with each other and doing the right thing, those types of things. So I like to think of your core values can stretch enough to suit a global team, and the definition of them may be slightly different in each location based on the location. But if we say core, they should really be core to the organization. But I mean, there's no one way to do things by any means. Do you have any other case studies of companies with bad cultures that have reached out for you to help? And what have they done to rectify and improve the culture? And where are they now in terms of culture? So I'm sure, Kim, you have lots of examples. We absolutely do. And, you know, I think it takes an intentional interest in adjusting your culture, right? And so that is simply, you know, kind of, it can start with as simple as like, we have 3 or 4 people that are not real, that we need to do some performance coaching with. And we would do some coaching with those employees, adjust some roles, adjust some structures, teach managers how to have really good coaching conversations, and you'll slowly start to see the culture adjust, right? So lots of different ways you can start, but you know, getting HR support and getting some help around that does make a really big difference, because we're talking about, you know, some expert advice. And I know if you were to speak with Kim or myself or Nicole, we'd be asking you lots of questions about what's going on in your organization. This is where we start. And we would decide what was the best way to start to adjust the culture and start to, and it could be dealing with a couple of people. It could be defining the core values. It could be rolling out check-in conversations. So all of these things that lead, it could be a better onboarding program. All of these things that lead to, you know, a more enhanced culture can definitely have an impact on, you know, can be supported with by Brannigans or by MyHR. Awesome. We're gonna leave the question and answer there because we've just got a few minutes left. And so, as I promised, I'm gonna do a quick demo of MyHR. Obviously, we'll show you the slide. We do have a slide here with a little. Oh, my mouse is not 1 second. So, okay, there we go. Here's our thank you slide here. So you can see our email addresses there. If you want to reach out with any of your specific questions, we can answer those questions there. We'll be sending the resources to you. Here's sort of some key takeaways. I always start to run out of a little bit of time here, but here's some key takeaways, right? Consider defining your core values, be explicit about what you want to see, ensure your leadership team models the culture, and address issues consistently and quickly. And as I said, you will get all these slides here. So just before we launch into the demo, so just, the idea being that, supporting both Brannigans and us would really support with culture around handbooks and policies, onboarding plans that orient new employees, performance review templates, and support with tough conversations. Those are kind of all the pieces we've talked about, sort of in a roundabout way around culture that we would support with there. So by all means, feel free to stay on if you'd like to have a quick demo of the software platform. I'd love to show you, and I won't be at all offended if you've gotten everything you need and choose to bounce off and have a lovely morning in Sydney or New Zealand, in Australia or New Zealand, or a lovely afternoon in Canada here. So we'll just pop through there. Kim, I'm imagining you'll just stay and hang out for a little bit.
I'll stay on, yes.
Awesome, and then we'll wrap it up from here. So I'm just gonna stop sharing for a second and share a new screen. Share. Screen 2, share. Awesome. I think we've got the right, can see, are you seeing the right screen there? Or are you seeing the Q&A screen there still?
No, it's the right screen.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, fantastic, thank you. So basically what you're looking at here, and it's a bit hard to jump out of something more philosophical into something a bit more direct. So what you're looking at here is a home page of MyHR. So this is my demo account, so none of the information is real in this account, but this is the home screen here. So what I wanted to show you is where culture would sort of show up in this areas here. So you get this idea of, you have this, your overview of your employees here. These are the reminders of things that are happening in upcoming events. So one of the first places we see the core values and sort of culture show up would be with an onboarding plan. So if we pop through to here, I can show an onboarding plan that I just added in. I believe I put it with Susan. Let's see if it was Susan that I added it to. And we go to onboarding. And we can see that there's an onboarding plan that would be here. So this is how we create an onboarding plan for someone. So it says, welcome. We would describe the core values of the organization. And then there would be these tasks that the employee would have to do. Well, this isn't the one I created. 1 second. Let me just find the right one. I'm going to just find one here. Sorry, I did create one, people. 1 second. I believe it's this one here. Awesome. So you can see the onboarding plan here. So the employee would have bank details, tax forms, all those regular things they would see. You'd see create a plan for first day 1, welcome phone call and emails, a handbook piece in here. And then you could even have a video in here with your core values. So when we work with organizations, we really help them create an onboarding plan that aligns with their core values there. Another place that you would see it show up would be here in performance. So we have performance reviews where we would help create a template library, and we would base it on your core values. So we would have a values-led performance review. And what you would see here is you would actually see here at Julie's Canadian Bike Shop, we strive to embody our core values every day. During our review, we would walk you through we will walk through each of the core values. So you would see these values here, and you would be able to provide comment on those values. And like I mentioned in the webinar, the employee would also make comment on those values as well there. So using that review piece here, the role-based goals here, a development plan, and then this is where your check-in questions would be going. So just having those regular check-in questions in the review, and you could actually open this review for a period of time, so you're regularly checking in around the core values and having those check-in conversations there. So that's two places that you would really see culture show up here. And then that other place here we talked about is, any type of, support you're looking for here. So, disciplinary support, probation support, any of those types of pieces here. We have this one, my requirement's not on the list. That's when you can send us a message and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this employee. They're not demonstrating the culture and values that we're looking for, and I'd love some support with that. That's where we become that interactive HR department. We're helping you drive those core values here. So lots of different places that you're going to actually see that show up in the MyHR platform. We would create those customized sort of reviews and whatnot for you there. So you can see these are the manager appraisals. So these are really performance reviews that are waiting to happen. All of those would have those core values piece in there. So you're really driving that conversation there. Which brings us right to the end of our hour. I like to finish very promptly, and thank you all for being here, and wish you all the best of your day. Thank you so much, Kim, for presenting with me today. Thanks for being here, Nicole, and thank you to our production person, Ruby, for helping set this all up today. So we'll look forward to catching you all on the next webinar, and really appreciate your attendance today. Thank you.
That was great. Thanks,
Thank
both.
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.